Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am here to talk to you about the global shift that is happening towards an increase in the awareness of the issue of trafficking in persons as it affects boys and men. But before I start, I'd like to give you all a sincere apology on behalf of my haircut. I asked my husband, how's my hair looking? And do I think I maybe need to get it fixed before I go to the conference? He's like, no, you look great. You look just like the Beatles. I was like, cool. Yeah, that's what I was going for. So I will be playing a rendition of Let It Be down by the pool at 8 p.m. tonight. You're all welcome to join me. Just joking. Obviously, I would not put you through that. Who am I and why should you listen to me? I am Maia. I am the Thailand director at Urban Light in Chiang Mai, Thailand. And these are all of the many places you can contact me. You will see on there I have a work phone and a personal phone. There's no difference between the two. Work-life balance is a myth, and anyone who tries to tell you otherwise is trying to sell you a pyramid scheme. So just watch out for that too. So I wanted to start off by showing you some old statistics. I've used this specific infographic that you can see here for two completely contrasting funding proposals that I have sent out. So I have been living and working in Thailand for the last 8 years, and I have been learning Thai the whole time, and that has given me the privilege to work with some amazing organizations. Shout out to Center for Girls in Chiang Khong and King Rim Kong, the Mekong School. And when I was working in this border town in northern Thailand, I was working with Center for Girls on the topic of child protection and trafficking prevention and protection. And I took a look at the statistics, and wow, over 70% of the detected victims, and again, using victims in the terms of the legal terms, in terms of what's used in these documents, 70%, over 70% are women. So I'm writing this funding proposal. So of course we need funding for women. It's true. I'm not arguing that. Don't want to take a penny away from women. It wasn't until I had more and more experiences and got to know the community a little deeper that I found some other not so great organizations that were excluding people for various different reasons. Oh, that kid drinks alcohol. Why would you help her? That kid's already involved in sex work. It's too late for her. That's a boy. Silence, radio silence, right? So when I saw the opportunity to come and work for Urban Light, I was like, wow, okay, that's my people. And then I switched to using this exact same graphic to say, you know what, 30% of the detected victims of human trafficking are male. And that's a pretty big minority. Can you guess the latest numbers? Time to guess, time to guess, time to guess. 80 people? 80%, that would be a lot, right? Overtaken women. 60, 40. 40%, no Googling. Yeah, you're right though. So from the latest Global Trafficking in Persons report from the UNODC, you can see that there are now an estimated 50 million victims, survivors, people who have been trafficked. 40% of them are male. That's a 150% increase from 2004 to 2020, and that equates to 20 million males around the world. To put that into perspective, because when I picture 20 million, that's just a number, it doesn't make sense to me. That's about the population of New York twice. Everybody in New York twice. And it's close to the entire population of Australia. Imagine the entire population of Australia, all survivors or victims of human trafficking, and no one wants them just because they're Australian. We love Australians, we want to help Australians. And so beyond the UNODC report, this year I was also reminded by a colleague, informed by a colleague, that there was a special topic of interest in the United States State Department Trafficking in Persons report. And I had to be reminded by a colleague because I've been asking for this for years and hoping for years, and this year was the year I was like, I give up looking, man. And when someone told me that it was in there, I'm like, yes, finally the world is paying attention. The numbers don't lie, the reports don't lie, we know this is happening. But as the title suggests, this issue and this specific demographic of people have been overlooked for way too long. So some of the key findings from that report, and these are, I've shared them in the WOVA app, they're also easily Googleable, were that while women do make up the majority of adult victims, at 42% of the detected victims, when it comes to children, the percentage is almost identical. And we're seeing more attention, not just from the United States State Department, not just from the UNODC, but also from large international organizations like ECPAT International, who have been running a global boys initiative, which we were thankfully, grateful to be in partnership with them on their first ever country report for Thailand back in 2019, and we've been on board with them ever since. And international journals, international researchers are also seeing that this is a huge gap in service provision, a huge gap in understanding. And the recurring themes that are coming out from all of those different sources that are super focused on this issue right now are challenges in victim identification, because people just don't believe this happens to men. This can't happen to boys, right? This can't happen to men. Barriers to accessing report. There's so much stigma, so much shame. It's hard enough being a girl and asking for help. Imagine being a boy and asking for help, and all the services you see seem like they're designed for girls. Or imagine being LGBT in a country where people don't accept that about you. You could be putting yourself in danger by reporting what's happening to you. We need more education and training. A lot of these young people don't understand what sexual exploitation is. They don't understand the definitions of human trafficking. If you don't know what's happening to you, and you don't know that it has a name, and you don't know that it's wrong, and that it should never, ever happen to anyone, how are you supposed to get help with that? And lastly, a need for more research and for more evidence-based interventions. And thankfully, together with the ECPAT Global Boys Initiative, we had a summit this year. It was fantastic. We had organizations from over 30 countries come together, researchers, practitioners, donors, to look at this issue and say, how can we fix it? The potential to do it is there. But there are only 30 countries. So with this Global Boys Initiative, we believe that together we can end the sexual exploitation of boys. And so I wanted to share some voices that have come out from some of these country reports, specifically the reports in Asia. So from Cambodia, I have tension in my chest because real men are not supposed to cry. In South Korea, I don't know why they call it national if they only support girls. Sri Lanka, children don't do sex with adults for pleasure. All children. Other jobs are more difficult for me because I'm a ladyboy. The job I do is a job, it's just an illegal job. The asterisk there is the person self-identifying as a ladyboy, which is their choice. I wanted to save my life, so I let him do what he wanted to do to me. If I had a choice, I would quit. And this one's actually from an article that Bangkok Post wrote about the research project. Wait. No, bored already? I talk about my hair again. Please enjoy a brief musical interlude. Let it be, let it be. Oh, okay, we're back. Okay, so we went from really horrible, awful things happening to children to me doing a little dance. That was weird. And now I want to talk to you about urban light, and this is where we come in, right? Not with the weird dancing, although that does happen a fair bit, to be honest. But how and why do we exist? How do we try and help navigate our way through this issue? Urban Light has been around since 2009, when our founder came to visit Chiang Mai and saw boys in the red light district available for sale for sexual exploitation. For that reason, we focus mainly on and work mainly with survivors of sex trafficking and highly vulnerable people. We also work with some people who have been forced into criminal activity, forced into child begging. And we exist to end the trafficking and exploitation of boys and men, shock horror, in Thailand. We work primarily with boys and men. So in addition to working with boys and men, we work with their families, we work with their partners, we work with their children. And for those people who don't have a safe family, we work with their found families, the people who have the most influence over their lives, the people who spend time with them, anyone who's important to them. And this is also an important point for the LGBT community, who often will have a chosen family, especially if they've been rejected by their biological family. So at our drop-in center, we don't turn anyone away. We're just more set up for men. So if a girl comes in, we might refer her to my good friend Helen, who has excellent services for women and girls. If a transgender individual comes in, like everybody's welcome, right from babies up to elderly people. Anyone who comes through the door will be welcomed and treated with dignity and respect. Sometimes we'll refer people out just because there are hundreds of organizations who can help women and there's only one of us. So we have to juggle the capacity of what we're able to realistically handle. And also because there are amazing organizations that already exist within Thailand that are run by and for people with LGBT or SOGI diverse identities. And so I don't think we need to tread on their toes. They're doing a great job. Our strategy for engaging, protecting, and empowering boys and men involves outreach. So we're going out to the places where we know that vulnerable boys and men spend their time, where they are likely to be exploited for sex, and we know where they are because we ask them. We have a drop-in center where we have activities for fun, for skills, for making a little bit of extra money, but most importantly, to spend time around safe adults and mentors who can help to restore people's faith in humanity, just that little bit. Then we try to protect people by providing workshops to provide them with the knowledge on, okay, what is human trafficking? What is sexual health? How do I protect myself from this? How do I work on financial literacy? How do I work on English skills to get employment? You name it, we can do it. We might not be doing everything all the time, but there's a lot under that umbrella. Then we have casework, so providing people with the resources that they need to follow their own life plan. So that can be housing, education, employment, support, legal advice, help with reintegration, healthcare. And then finally, in the Empower section, is creating opportunities for boys and men to be involved with the local community, leading their own small activities with network partners, and also finding ways for them to contribute to these international advocacy efforts that we're doing right now. And hopefully in the next 5-10 years, I won't be here and one of my boys will. That would be the dream. And another thing that's super important to us is participation is integrated into everything we do. And guidance from the boys and the men that we work with is integrated in every area of this strategy. So you can see in the picture, literally, they're crossing out parts that they don't want us to do and helping us prioritize. How much time do I have? I need to go quicker. So why are boys, men, and SOGI diverse? Someone calls them soggy youth. That makes it sound like they're standing outside in the rain. LGBT youth, why are they getting left behind? We seem to have this blind spot where, I mean, you saw the first slide, right? I made the same mistake. 70%, we need to help women. But we do seem to have this blind spot for those 20 million people who don't fit into the category of checkbox, I'm a woman. But human traffickers aren't separating people into boxes like that. We know from the data, we know from experience that people of all genders are being trafficked. And so shouldn't we be fighting that too? Shouldn't we be addressing our interventions to people of all genders too? And just to return to some of the voices, to give a bit more insight on how and why people are being overlooked. From Cambodia. Boys feel pain like girls too. I'm sad and I don't know who to talk to because I'm afraid they will laugh at me. People don't see boys as victims. I didn't know what to tell my mum. And this is the one I hear over and over again, working directly with the boys in Chiang Mai, Thailand. Pimai, I just want to disappear. I don't want to think about it at all. So when it comes to reporting and the detection of victims, it's also harder to know the real number because human traffickers are terrible at keeping up with their M&E. Reporting standards just, yeah. We do it all the time. They don't. Anyway, and they're right to feel like this. We have some cases there was one case in particular, a young man who was being sexually exploited, and he wanted to report what was happening to him. He didn't want to get involved with the police, but he shared screenshots from the perpetrator. And so we did some asking around and showing these screenshots to people and asking if anyone could help. And the questions around the boy started to crop up. Well, how old is he? We don't know because he's stateless and he has a fake passport. Well, then we might have to do bone testing. Okay, he's not going to want to do bone testing. He'd have to come and do an interview, an interrogation. Yeah, he's not going to want to do that. And the insidious, the most problematic thing about this is the traffickers know. They know, and they know exactly who to pick and exactly why to pick them, because they know that that boy, if he ever even got up the courage to stand up in court and say, you did this to me, there's no way. No one would believe him. You're a boy, you're stateless, you lie, you're a thief. That's not even a real passport. You've lied about everything else. But I believe him. Thanks. So then I wanted to sort of link back to some research that we did more recently. It's a research project that we started before COVID, and it took forever, but we got there in the end. And the title that we landed on was, Tell Them What Happened to Me. And that was the kind of the summary of the respondents, what they were telling us about how they would recommend helping people who don't want to be sexually exploited or who want to get away from being sexually exploited, was to share stories and be realistic. So we wanted to focus on boys, men, and SOGI diverse people or LGBT people, specifically transgender women and people of the third gender in Thailand, like maybe would be called non-binary in English. Because all of these people deserve to be included in the decision-making that affects them. And it showed up that they have voices, they have opinions, they want to be heard. And this is just the first step in getting there. So this report is available for download. We started with a 12-seed respondent-driven sample, and it was quite interesting to see how this played out. We had a mix of cisgender, so people who were born as boys and feel like boys, and transgender or third gender, like LGBT people as respondents. And you can see in the way that this developed that if you look into the full report, the boys and the men were much more likely to tell, they could get maybe one, maybe two people, maybe four people to get involved. But on the LGBT side, one person was able to recruit a lot of people, and you can see that in the blue towards the bottom there. So that was just an interesting finding about the ways that people connect and how masculinity and gender identity may play a role in how open we feel we can be about traumatic experiences that have happened to us. Oh, go back. Forward. Did I miss one? No. Okay, great. So what were the findings? Number one interesting finding is the use of the internet for child sexual exploitation and the sex trade is widespread and pervasive. This is probably obvious. But what was not quite as obvious to us was that just how interlinked these two things were. 92% of the respondents, and yes, this was kind of a small sample size, it was 109 respondents, but 92 of them were engaged in trading sex, both online and offline. So we can throw away any ideas that just people are just doing this in their bedroom. The vast majority of them are not. They are getting out of that bedroom, meeting people on the streets, meeting them in hotels, and it is starting online and going offline. the most common form of engaging in online sexual exploitation was sending sexual photos or videos. When asking about what are the needs to help people choose not to engage in these behaviors, or to help them escape if they want to escape, or help people not have to go down that path, the respondents told us something that is probably also obvious, or should be at least, is that people need their basic needs to be met. They need work, they need decent housing, they need an education. The machine's there, that's probably why. And we saw this very close link between homelessness, housing instability, and sexual exploitation or sex trafficking. You can see here we've got 3 rows from the participants, people who were either homeless or experiencing housing instability when they were children, people who were currently homeless, and people who were both, so chronically homeless, essentially. And this made up a relatively high proportion for such a small sample size. And as you can see here, is particularly prevalent, more common amongst the male respondents. And we know that homelessness and sexual exploitation go hand in hand. Some people, you can see the full report, have even argued that these issues should not be considered separately at all because they are so closely linked. The issues of substance abuse, domestic violence in the family, mental health and physical disabilities, and the traffickers or employers exploiting you. Some of these things can be chicken and egg type situations. So, did you have a substance abuse disorder and end up in the sex industry to pay for that substance disorder and the dependency on that drug? Or were you trafficked into sex trafficking and started to use drugs as a way to cope, or use drugs because a customer told you you had to, and then became addicted? Same with mental health problems. Were you targeted specifically because you have a mental health problem that makes you more vulnerable, so therefore it is easier to exploit you and deceive you and grab you and pull you into this web of trafficking? Or did you encounter something so traumatic that it completely changed your mental health and your physical health, and that's something that you really need to work on as a result? So these are the chicken and egg type situations I see. Another key finding was that physical and sexual violence were very common, with 65% indicating that they had been raped or sexually assaulted in their lifetimes, and 26% saying that they had been physically assaulted by a customer, sometimes trafficker, sometimes customer, in the last 6 months. Another obvious to me, I hope it's obvious to everyone, finding was that gender norms and expectations present unique vulnerabilities. So the idea that men are strong, men don't get trafficked, what are you talking about? Boys don't cry. Or ideas that, LGBT people are promiscuous, they're asking for it, they wanted the attention. All of these things are very, very harmful, not true, and get in the way of the work that we're doing. And also the stigma and shame around discussing sex. When you can't talk about it, you can't talk about what might go wrong in that area. And so in countries where sex is taboo and it's an issue that isn't discussed, children are going to be more at risk. In fact, not in countries, in any community where you are not talking to children about what's happening, It's not a matter of if they will encounter stuff to do with sex. They will be encountering it. They will encounter it online. It will pop up in their mobile phones. People will be on the apps contacting them. Would you prefer for them to learn about it from an NGO who's going to tell you about consent, tell you about good touch, bad touch, and tell you how to protect yourself? Or would you prefer for them to learn directly from the traffickers? That's a conversation I suggest we have with families. Another key finding. So earlier I talked about 65% indicating that they had been raped or sexually assaulted. When asked the question, have you been raped or sexually assaulted? That was not the number. And we knew that would happen. So we asked the question in several ways. We asked, have you been raped? We also asked, have you been forced to have sex when you didn't want to? And that's how we got the number. So people knowing, people misunderstanding the definition of rape and sexual assault is a huge problem. Again, if you don't know it's wrong, if you don't know that it's a bad thing that's happened to you, then you're not going to self-identify, you're not going to seek services, not going to seek assistance. And in this research and in the research we did with ECPAT International back in 2019, young people, well, with ECPAT International, we worked with frontline service providers. We gave them scenarios in which young people were being exploited and had the people respond, is this person a victim? Is this person a perpetrator? Is this person a facilitator? We found that amongst professionals and in this report amongst young people, there is widespread confusion about the definitions of sexual exploitation. So again, if you don't know it's happening to you, how can you get help? We also found a gender bias where in the situations where a person was LGBT, transgender youth, people were more likely not to perceive them as a victim. Potential victims wish to report crimes without their personal information being disclosed. And again, it reminds me of the young boy who would have had to have his bone marrow tested and no one would believe him. He wants someone to go after that man. He just doesn't want to be a part of it. He's sending me the screenshots. He just doesn't want to go to court. And it's a challenge to overcome. How can we prosecute somebody when there's no defendant? Is that the word? No, when there's no victim on the stand. But remaining anonymous and having anonymous reporting channels within your own organization can be a great way for you to get, at least begin to get information. You can maybe build trust, maybe eventually people will want to open up more. The report, like I said, was titled, "Tell Them What Happened to Me," because when we were asking the young people surveyed, what's the best way, what would you do if you wanted to tell someone not to get into this line of work, or what would you suggest might be a way to help people get out of this kind of work? The responses were things like this. Tell them about the evil things that I encountered. Tell them, go on and have a better life than this. Don't do this at all. It's torture for the mind and body. And some people who said, tell them about the pros and the cons. The pros. Some of these people see pros. They think there are good points in what they're doing. And it is important, I think, to be realistic and have those conversations. Yes, you're making fast money. Yes, you're able to support your family. Let's not pretend that's not true. Let's be honest and realistic about the reasons why people choose to remain in exploitative situations when they don't have a gun to their head. The economic factors behind it. What are the pros? If you refuse to look at them, then you're refusing to find better alternatives to them. So let's have frank, real, honest conversations about that. people also talked about harm reduction, not letting people, they said just don't let people be on apps. A lot of people in the research were groomed. They were on dating apps, and they weren't looking for customers, the customers came looking for them. Talking about HIV and sexually transmitted infections and the advice about what will happen if you don't protect yourself from those. And finally, we have some recommendations. So I have up here at the front a summary of those key findings, because I know I went over that kind of quickly. It's very beautiful, glossy paper. More details, QR code, ooh, and the crowd goes wild. I also have one over here for service providers. And for funding partners. And I also have some cool stickers. I've got this one that says, I'm a feminist who cares about men, ask me why. And it says, we need to talk about boys. And one that says, feminism is for everyone. So come and get those at the end. So recommendations for service providers. Help reduce prejudice and discrimination. Let's not continue to, what's the word? Perpetuate, yeah, great, thank you. That was a test. Perpetuate those ideas and those stereotypes that keep people under the radar, that keep people hidden, that keep these victims, survivors, people from being detected. Understand the online landscape, and there is no one better place to tell you about the online landscape in your own community than the young people themselves. A boy just taught me how to use CapCut to edit videos the other day. It was great. They know the hashtags, they know the websites, they know the platforms. Just ask them. They know the slang, they know the emojis, they know, just ask them. Educate people on sex, educate them on consent, and tell them where to get help if something goes wrong. Like I said earlier, and this is going to vary probably in your specific contexts on how appropriate it is, at what age it's appropriate to have these conversations with children. But again, I would encourage you to have the conversations with with parents, with teachers, and with the people who maybe have concerns around this, and remind them that it's not a question of if children are going to learn about sex, it's a question about when and from who. So again, putting that question to them of, would you prefer nice, friendly NGO lady to come and talk in nice, friendly child terms, or would you prefer for it to be some creep on the internet inviting them to have sex for money? Because it's literally that simple. Engage with existing resources, so work with families. A lot of the people that we were surveying did have other jobs, and that's something you can look into. Like if people are part-time involved in in exchanging sex, part-time doing some other kind of work, well, maybe that's an avenue you can support them to get more skilled in and provide them with alternatives so that they can choose to find safe, legal work where their rights will be better protected. Promote meaningful participation and act on it. So, like I think I said yesterday, we don't have a survivor up here to come and talk to you from Urban Light, but we do have an excellent level of participation within our organization. The boys are constantly telling me, PMI, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong, the food's terrible, I want you to do this better, I want you to do that better. And I'm like, yes. Not because I'm doing a bad job, but because I know they feel safe to tell me what they really think. And it is so valuable to have their contributions, their feedback, their input, because I think it was, nope, name blanking. Our lovely speaker yesterday in the morning talking about, yes, Chandra, thank you. Again, wonderful testing again, past second time, 10 points. Who was talking about, we as professionals, we know nothing. And that is so true. I'm just a human Google Translate to bring you the information that I have gathered from the team and the boys on the ground. Do not overlook adults. So work with families, sure, I feel like we're good at that already, but also work with found families, also work with chosen families. Understand that children do not exist in a bubble. When you are conducting outreach, you will not find a group of young men aged 0 to 17 over here, young men aged 18 to 24 over here, and 25 and over here. That is not how humans operate. Engage with all of them. Engage with them because they have power dynamics, but engage with them also because they're human beings who deserve care. And work in partnership. So sometimes, if you don't understand that you have been sexually exploited, you might not be identified through the traditional channels, through an anti-trafficking organization. You might instead go to a housing solution, like a shelter, or you might go to a sexual health service and it might be flagged there. So if you're looking for vulnerable people, go build those connections, work with those people, let them know what services you have on offer for aftercare or what services you have for prevention. And finally, if you're looking to get into working with boys and men and you're confused about where do you start, start with the girls you're already working with and ask them this simple question: how is your brother? I know that I'm speaking from a place of knowledge about Thailand specifically, and in other countries, in other cultures, even in other subcultures within Thailand, gender dynamics are very different. On the whole, in Thailand, when you're working with the most vulnerable people, the people who are facing multi-dimensional poverty, the people who have been affected by disability, by substance abuse, by domestic violence, the people who are ethnic minority groups, the people who maybe don't have ID cards, the people who might have darker skin, the people who are generally looked down on by society. If the girl in that family is not doing great, chances are her brother's probably not doing the best either. So that would be my one takeaway for service providers. If you don't remember anything else from what I said, remember this. Don't remember the haircut thing, that was a joke. Remember this. How's your brother? We also have some recommendations for funding partners. I'm sure you've all just been sitting on the edges of your seats waiting for me to tell you what to do. But practical recommendations for how can we really make this work if we want to have change in this area. Help to reduce prejudice and discrimination. Actively question it within your own processes and your own planning and your own alignment. Who makes the rules on that? Are we focusing on girls and women only? If so, why? When we were asking about how to get out or how to stop from getting in to being sexually exploited, the majority of answers from the young people told us that a combination of awareness and alternative employment were both very important. And I usually don't like to talk about awareness because awareness to me is like you know something about something, you don't necessarily do anything about it. We got involved, in fact, in 2018, we had a piece of research called Beyond Awareness that was talking about moving beyond that into addressing the structural and root causes of the issue and remedying and providing aftercare for people who have been trafficked. But in the case of boys and men, we are still at that stage where the global shift is coming, baby, but we do need your help to be out there and telling people and reminding people, this is happening to boys and men too. This is happening to LGBTQIA plus people too. This is happening to people of all genders, and they all deserve to be treated with human dignity and respect. If we're looking at providing housing and education, we need multi-year commitments. I can't have a young man or a family coming to me and saying, we want to put our kids in school. Great, I'll give you a scholarship for a year. You have your first year of high school, and then after that, I don't know. Maybe I'll help if I have the money. We need multi-year commitments for that. Consider staff as programmatic costs, because that is where the magic happens. It's in the conversations, it's in those little brief moments of humanity where you spark trust in people and you let them know not everyone out there is out to get you. Not everyone who engages with you has an agenda. There are no strings attached here. Some people just care about you and value you as people. And there's nothing more transformative than that. And the moments where you say, I care about you and I want you involved in this because you're important. Flexible funding so that we can adapt to changing circumstances, like, I don't know, if there was a global pandemic suddenly. And also because trauma recovery is not time-bound. There's no expiration date, and there's no 5-year plan with specific indicators and assumptions of, in year 5, we will have completely healed 20 people of trauma, and 60 people will have made progress towards the... Trauma doesn't work like that. We're talking about human beings. We would love to support survivors to move into these places of leadership, but I can't tell you how long that is going to take. But I can tell you that if we have more money and less red tape, it will happen faster. Invest in technical capacity and targeted online campaigns. We're all old now, sorry to break it to you. We're not the greatest on the internet. Maybe some of you are, who knows? But we are light years behind the traffickers. They're already on the dark web. They're already in the apps. They're already contacting the children. Where are we? I can't actually read that. I'm saying, yeah. There's a warning there. 10 minutes, okay, cool. Yes, so I think that we as professionals need to understand that we don't know what we're doing in the tech space, and we need help. We need help badly. And we need to be fighting those messages online, the ones that are reaching the children, with positive messaging and with fighting fire with fire or fighting fire with water. I don't know, choose your own metaphor. To put those positive messages out there that say, hey, this is not okay. Hey, this happens to people of all genders. Hey, consent is cool. You know, all of those things. And lastly, and most importantly, invest in survivors. And that's been so great to see that as a theme emerging in this workshop. It feels like it's so obvious that we shouldn't have to be saying it, but here we are. But yes, invest in survivors. So, the global shift is upon us, people. It's already happening. We're already doing it. The researchers exist. The practitioners exist. We have connections to people all over the world. And if you need connections to a specific country or specific area, contact me. I'll put you in touch. What's your contribution going to be? Thank you very much for listening. I believe we have 5 minutes, but then also at lunchtime, I'm going to be around and you can just talk to me. Any specific questions you have, I can just answer. And I do invite you to come and take the shiny brochures and the stickers up at the front here, because that will make my journey back to Thailand a little bit lighter. Any questions? 5-minute question, anyone? Rock, scissors, paper. I'm serious. I'm so serious. Yeah. Who won? Who won? Wait, we didn't decide if it was the winner or the loser had to answer the question. Wait, who won? You won? Oh, right, okay, cool.
So thank you so much for sharing. So this is a really, really great topic for me. So I just want to ask you, because identifying male victim in human trafficking is already challenging. So what is actually, based on your experience, what is actually the key principles once you identify the victim? How is it different when you work with the female victim and also male victim? Should it be the opposite gender who approach the victim, or is there any key principles like that? And also, thank you for sharing about the shelter needed for the male victim, especially the adult male, because even here in Bali, we don't actually have a lot of shelter. Once the victims is identified, there are not so many shelter for male, especially adult male. So thank you for sharing about the chosen families and working with the families.
Yeah, of course, no problem. Yeah, it's an issue that we see very commonly around shelter and the unnecessary separation of children from their families, because if the caregiver is an adult male, they are not safe to be in the same facility. And that's kind of a problem with putting people into institutional care. So the housing solutions that we offer at Urban Light are rented housing solutions for families or individuals. So if someone's going to school, going to university, we'll find them a place near there. If they've got a new job they're transitioning back into, we'll find a job, close to, we'll find an apartment for them near where they're about to be working. So that's one way we try to avoid separating families wherever possible, like only separating families when it's absolutely necessary. In terms of when a boy has been identified, I don't think we need to wait for them to be identified before we can help them, right? Everybody who comes through the door at Urban Light comes because they need something. And so oftentimes we can start our interventions without having to have a long screening process of, have you been exploited? And sometimes people ask me how many people who come through the doors at the drop-in center are survivors of human trafficking. It's like, we don't ask that on the door, It's kind of, so in which of the following ways have you been trafficked? Tell me about your worst trauma on first meeting. Hi, I'm Maia, nice to meet you. You don't have to wait for that. We can just start helping them because they don't have a safe place to live. We can start helping them because they're on drugs. We can start helping them for a whole number of reasons. And if they choose to disclose later, yeah, I can read that one that time, then cool, we'll work with that. But we don't want to pressure anyone into something that could be re-traumatizing. We don't necessarily have to wait for someone to be self-identifying in order to work with them. That just being vulnerable is enough. And in terms of should we have two different genders? Great question. So I used to work in a wonderful organization in Chiang Khong, Thailand, where it was all women. And I do remember having a workshop we did once where we were trying to invite boys to come and just only girls were showing up. And after a certain point, I was like, you know what, we're all lovely, but why would they want to hang out with me? Who is this weird white woman and why does she want me to come spend time with her? So there is an element of that. I think in one thing that Urban Light does really well is that we've been around for ages and we have a lot of peer-to-peer recommendations. So people in the community know us and trust us, and the boys account for about 75% of the people who come in through our doors is boys telling other boys about us. But partly we do have some kind of gendered, stereotypically male type activities. We have football, we have bowling, we have things like that can be fun ways to engage. And then in the research, we did find that boys and men were more likely to have a preference over the gender of their service provider but it was not the same gender across the board. So for some boys and men, they might prefer to speak to a woman because they were abused by a man. For some boys and men, they might prefer to speak to a man because they have to talk about their genitals, you know? So it's providing, like, having a level of diversity in your, in the services that you're providing is also great. And I mean, it's just, it always goes back to choice, right? That's the same with all survivors, I'd imagine, is like giving as much choice and freedom as possible. And also remembering that boys are just boys, you know? Like when teachers are gonna teach a class, they're not like, oh, how can I get this to work for boys as well, you know? I think it's important that we do have a choice of services for people so that when people walk through the door, it's not like, oh, everything's pink and teddy bears and wonderful and it's set up for six-year-old girls and I'm a 17-year-old boy and this does not feel cool. But to have a mix, you know, and not to be too rigid about who's allowed to go where. You know, we have some girls come through the door and they're covered in tattoos and they're, you know, and it's like, yeah, they're one of us. You know, it's not, we don't have to be so fixed about it, but just like having a range of services for people to choose for themselves is what I'd recommend. I think I'm out of time, but like I said, at lunchtime, I mean, I could talk about this for days. So I'm here till Thursday.